Welcome to Harvest to Pour, the business of beverages, with your host, Matthew Shipp. This is the podcast for all of those who are involved in the agriculture all the way to the distribution of beverages. And now your host, Matthew Shipp.
Hello and welcome to Harvest to Pour. I'm your host, Matthew Shipp, and today I'm here with Nolan Smith, co-founder of Backbone Bourbon Company. How you doing today,
Very
Nolan?
well, thanks, Matthew. Thanks for having me.
Great. So tell us a little bit about yourself. How you found your way into the bourbon industry, and how Backbone got started.
Well, I'm originally from South Africa. I came to the U.S. in the mid to late 90s, went to college here, actually did my MBA. And I was able to worked in a very corporate environment, banking and finance, and I hated it. So I've always been an entrepreneur at heart. So I loved wine. I loved alcohol. You know, that probably didn't come out right, but I had a passion for wine for sure. So I just went and started talking to everyone I could. I found my business partner in the early 2000s, and he and I started a distribution company in Indiana. And so Wine and Spirits, just for the state of Indiana, I started in 2005. And that was really critical to Backbone because initially the brands, at least the first two brands were started as private labels in our distribution company. So I have a wife and two kids. I have a dog and two cats. I just not a fancy guy. I just enjoy friends. I play golf. I love to fish. I love to cook. I love to drink wine. I know it sounds like I should be in the wine business, more in the wine business than the bourbon business, but I think you'll find out why loving wine and my origin there has helped me in the bourbon business in a big way. But in a nutshell, that's basically it.
All right. So what really inspired you to start the bourbon?
Well, it's the old-fashioned, we got dumped by a supplier that was buying barrels from, at the time it was LDR. The supplier had, actually they were working on a vodka brand. And as a way to kind of pass the time, and they found all these barrels down in Lawrenceburg, Indiana, which is literally an hour and 15 minutes down the road. So my partner and I had a very close-up look at what the supplier was doing. The supplier was with us for less than a year. It was one of the most successful. We started with the bourbon. We actually never got to the vodka, but within less than a year, it had been our most successful brand we'd ever represented. And we quickly got dumped, and the supplier went to a bigger distribution network. So it was out of complete revenge that we went down to Lawrenceburg, Indiana. I sent an email to their general mailbox in 2010, and I got a very short, poor grammar, 1 or 2 line reply back saying, "We can sell you barrels." So we went down there and met with a man who later became my longtime representative at LDR, then MGP. And we bought 20 barrels of the 2008 bourbon, which will remain a very special set of barrels in my mind, 2008. And really, it's so funny to talk about it now because it doesn't seem like it would be real, but there were literally thousands and thousands and thousands of barrels down there. And they were not very expensive. I mean, compared to today, a 2 or 3 year old bourbon, it was. If you told someone what I paid, I'm not going to tell you what I paid. But compared to today, it's just like that's like your grandfather going to the movies and paying a quarter. It feels like that kind of a thing. So
wow.
So
you were early on.
Yeah,
LDR.
correct. And I think the fact that it was an hour and 15 minutes down the road, I think it just made it easy. It makes sense. I mean, any kind of resource that's in an area, I think is going to drive people like me, entrepreneurs, to access that resource and try and do something with it. So I think we're just in the right place. And again, I mean, I think my partner and I are both wine guys. We started our distribution company mainly as a wine company, and then we slowly got into spirits. We did vodka and things like that, and then we got a really significant bourbon supplier in the mid 2000s, 2006, and then we started to get into it. And in the middle of 2000s, 2006, 2007, bourbon wasn't that big. I mean, people drank it. It's kind of like your dad's drink. But by the end of the 2010s, we started to see this was really something that was catching fire. And even in 2010, it wasn't a big deal. It wasn't something that you were going to invest millions of dollars in. But boy, by the mid 2010s, boy, I tell you what, there was some interesting days. I mean, 2014, you could not buy a barrel. You could buy all the juice you wanted, but there were no barrels available. They'd had a poor winter in 2013. The companies that cut down the trees, and so the cooperage, they rely on the guys that go into the forest, and these guys just couldn't get enough wood out. So yeah, it's funny how things work out in the end. You look back and you go, yeah, that was kind of that worked out well. So
how many years have you guys been? Have you been Backbone Bourbon?
So to continue the story, we started the first brands in 2010, 2011. By 2014, we spun it off into a separate company. Different investment, different structure, different financials. So, and really, that was basically it was a no-brainer because we were getting inquiries from surrounding states. Hey, we've heard about Backbone Bourbon. Can we carry it? And we were like, well, we can't because we don't have the license. But we figured out how to get the license, and now we're in about 27 states. So it's based on we source our whiskey, and I'm going to talk a lot about I think I have very distinct views on being a non-distilling producer. I think it's a very, very creative set of people or companies. I think we've had to really stand out because in the early days you could sell someone else's whiskey and get away with it. Now you can't. You really have to. I mean, I'm going to talk about this a lot, but the whiskey we source, I view it as a base, Matthew. It's like we've had several different versions of our company. I think our identity's more solid now, but I see Backbone Bourbon Company more as a kitchen, as a restaurant where we have great ingredients, but we deconstruct and elevate. And that's going
to be okay. That's going to be great. We're definitely going to get into that further. Like you said, you want to get into that. Before we do, I don't want to be remiss of the journey you've taken to get there. And obviously, you've already spoken about quite a few challenges getting to the point you are. What were some of your greatest challenges you faced early on to get Backbone to where it is today?
Well, in the early days, we could. Well, I think overall building a brand is really tough. I think you got to do it in stages. You do it in pieces, and I still think most companies never really get to where they think they can go. So overall, I think building the brand is really tough. In the early days, I remember we didn't know what was going to happen to LDI. Was someone going to buy it and then lock up the production for a captive brand? Remember, we'd started in 2010, and it was Backbone was a very important part of our distribution company. So we didn't really know what's going to happen to MGP board, and they said, look, we're just going to continue to sell to people that want to source, and that was a huge relief. I think raising money was tough. I mean, of all the businesses I've been involved in, the concept of locking away a bunch of cash for years is not a great business model. It really isn't. So that was a challenge. Early days of Backbone, we couldn't buy. Well, first of all, we couldn't buy barrel for a time. That barrel shortage. Then you couldn't buy anything aged. Everything we bought when we transitioned to a separate company was all new make. So we were relying on the barrels we had bought through our other company. Those were the seed barrels, and I don't know what we would have done if we didn't have those. If we were just a complete brand new operation with no, prior history, just buying barrels and having to wait and contriving smaller barrels or some of these aging processes that are out there, it would have been really tough. So I think what I'm saying is we've had to roll with the punches. We've had a lot of challenges. I think that's why we've had several different versions of our business. And I think we've been able to adapt and overcome, and so much so that I think as I said earlier, that the innovation that's going on in companies like Backbone, and believe me, there are others out there that are really doing things at a very high level, using someone else's whiskey and really making it their own. It's a much needed part of the industry. A big part of that innovation that I'm talking about, we first discovered through our single barrel program. And I'll mention the word innovation, and I want to define it right now, but essentially, for me, it's very simple. It's a ton of rebarreling, and then it's blending. And I think when you have both in place and you're competent at both, I think then you can do something pretty special. And I think that's kind of where we're at right now. The single barrel program allowed us to find a massive spectrum of flavors.
So you talked about taking in seeding barrels to you so you can make your own. Is that something that's still currently being done, or has that industry changed where that's not something that's possible anymore?
What I meant by seed barrels is that we had bought enough aged whiskey to start our brand, to start selling outside of Indiana. We had enough older whiskey that we had bought through our other company. And I don't know what it was. It was probably 100 to a couple hundred barrels. And that was enough to get us going as an independent company. And that allowed us to, we could buy a new make and let it age. And we thought, well, what are we going to do? And of course, we didn't start nearly as well as we thought we would. And so those seed barrels really lasted a lot longer than we had hoped for. But
okay, great.
So that's...
All right. I was just kind of asking about that because what would you suggest to another entrepreneur looking to start up a bourbon business, or whether a non-distillery or a distillery?
What I recommend is they become a tax accountant or they open a funeral home.
Okay.
No, it's a really hard business. You have to have a pretty strong stomach for this. It's one thing to, the old joke, that you've heard it a million ways, is that how do you make a small fortune in the bourbon business? You start with a big fortune. We started with very little, and you have to have a strong stomach for this. You have to be confident in what you're doing. You have to be competent in your ability to adapt, and just to trust the process. It's not for the faint of heart. So if you're looking for a nice steady gig, this is probably not for you. Unless you have a lot of money and you can just play with it, then that's fine. By all means, go ahead and play with it. But have a strong stomach, for sure.
Strong stomach. All right. Great advice. So I'm going to move into, we've talked about some of your challenges as your journey and redefining your business several times. Well, now I want to kind of get into what you hinted at before. I want to take you through the journey. This is the heart of this podcast, the harvest to the pour journey. Now, I'm interested in you talking about, where you source from, how you make your bourbon uniquely yours. There's a lot of crafters out there. A lot of people did not take your advice and open a funeral home. They went all in and they make their bourbon uniquely theirs. All the way to the pour, how you market this, how your customers are enjoying it, and how you basically get your name out there. So that's the harvest to pour journey. I like that you've prefaced this uniquely with the non-distillery,
non-distilling producer.
Producers.
Yeah.
Non-distilling producers. So I figured is that where you start your harvest journey?
Yeah.
Or is it start beyond that? All right. Take us through that part.
Sourcing, most of our whiskey comes from MGP. Most of what we use and bottle is MGP. However, about 4 years ago, we identified another significant source for us. It's a local distillery here in Indianapolis. And it's completely different. They're small. Everything is made in a pot still. So we appointed a second source because a couple things. One, we didn't want to have all eggs in one basket, but also as a way to up the quality, up the innovation component of our whiskey. So on one hand, we have mass-produced excellent whiskey coming from MGP. On the other hand, we have this handcrafted, small batch, pot still made whiskey. Every run's a little bit different. There's a lot of variety. In the small distillery, we can really hone in on what kind of barrels we use, how long they've been air dried, what the toast is, what the char is. But in addition to that, the partner that I have at the small distillery, we really are using local products. So although I'm not making whiskey, I've picked someone that is really a local, supports local, what's available locally. So our corn and our rye in this source is all from Indiana, and then I think the malted barley is not very far away. It's somewhere in the Midwest. So, but I don't know if that answers your question, Matthew.
No, that's great. Since we're going to go just a little bit deeper into a non-distilling producer, obviously a distilling that you would have your own still. So you said this is a integral part of the innovation behind that. Since we're at that point right now, as we edge into what makes your product uniquely yours, go ahead and lead us into why that is important, why you see this as important for the
Yeah, so the thing that you're always trying to do, or the thing that you sometimes fighting against when you don't make your own whiskey is, what's your identity? How is your stuff unique? Is it proprietary? So I can say, for probably at least more than half, maybe 2/3 of our existence, 9 years. I don't know that we had something proprietary. I mean, we had a little bit. We've always been a high proof company. 2010, small batch high proof was not very common, but it's a lot more common these days. So in the last 3 years, we've really dug into this concept of innovation. And by that, I mean rebarreling and blending. And when you do that, it does start to feel like a kitchen. You do start to feel like a chef, where you are taking great base ingredients, deconstructing them, and then elevating them into something unique. We have 3 new products that have come out in the last 2.5 years, and they are a great representation of this movement, this idea. I don't think there's not a lot that tastes like them. They're still classically American whiskey in flavor profile, but there's a spin on the flavor profile that's uniquely us. And I'll give you a good example. We have a product called Decade Down, Backbone Decade Down. It's an anniversary edition. We only do 1 batch a year. It came out in 2020, and it was to celebrate the 10-year anniversary of our first product, which is Backbone Uncut. So Decade Down is very simply, it's about 85% really good straight bourbon, probably 6 to 7 years old. And then the rest of it is good bourbon finished in Oloroso sherry barrels. As simple as that sounds, it's really a wonderful flavor profile. There are other whiskeys that do the same thing, but I think there's not a lot that quite have the elegance of Decade Down. And we got a great score on Whiskey Advocate. In the summer edition, we got 93 points for the 2022 batch. It was the highest rated bourbon of that magazine edition. It beat a bunch of companies that have a lot more time in business, a lot more funding, a lot more credit. So that's a really good example of what I'm talking about.
So take us through some of the different steps of this reblending, and also do you feel as it makes you more nimble, as in playing with different flavor profiles, and somebody who's tied to a
yeah.
still?
So let me back up a little bit. So I define innovation as rebarreling and blending. Anyone can do rebarreling. When you barrel new whiskey and you taste it after 4 years, I'm going to make up a number here. I'm going to say 90% flavor comes from the barrel experience. So the barrel is a really critical part of how whiskey becomes flavorful. So that was kind of an aha moment, that it's not like we invented rebarreling, but it's a way to develop flavor in your base whiskey. So the single barrel program was critical because we started rebarreling things in very traditional finishing barrels like port, rum, sherry, and then we found non-traditional finishes like mezcal and Grand Marnier, and some brandies like pear brandy and apple brandy, and so this entire spectrum of flavors opened up to us. And in each finish there were different variations. There's rum from different parts of the world. How long you keep the whiskey in the barrel, it gave you dimensions that were so cool. What I'm leading up to say is that part, people can replicate that. What's hard to replicate is to have a sense of how to blend in a way that you create things that are different, things that have their own identity. It's very easy to get when you think you go to blending. Just make sure that everything you all the products that you're creating have their own identity, because I think what people can get, the trap is that everything starts to taste the same. Another trap is it great? Is one glass great, but two's too much? So can you make a whiskey? Can you blend in a way that you'd want to have a couple and not get tired of that whiskey? And I think, and this is what I mentioned earlier, that I think there's a lot more nuance in the wine world, and I think that background for my partner and I was really helpful in this part of our business, where we know how to balance flavors. We really, sometimes it takes a very delicate hand to, put less than you think in there, because that less is going to be more. If that makes sense. So that's what makes us different, is that we created all these flavor profiles, but then we figured out a way to use them. And honestly, there's a lot more possibilities out there for different flavor profiles. There's a ton. So hopefully that answers your question.
Is there in the process of doing that? I mean, you said you wanted to make these taste profiles unique. What were some of the challenges that you kind of ran into to keep your process consistent?
Yes.
Yet come up with something.
So
different?
That's a great question. The batches we do, I think we have this kind of an informal rule where 90% of the batch has to be similar to what we've done in the past. But then there's this 10%, maybe it's 15%, where it's just impossible to make it identical. So another challenge is some of this blending we do, barrels have to get to a certain point to give us a certain flavor profile. So, we have to be thinking ahead that if those sherry barrels I mentioned a decade down, those need to be in that sherry barrel for at least a year. So I'm already thinking, a year out for, batch 2024, that I've got to have stuff that's kind of ready for that. And I've got some shortcuts that I've developed that I experiment with, and some have worked and some haven't. But for sure, that's the batch thing is, I think it's kind of what I would want as a consumer, that each batch, I want people to come to me and say, that batch that you did, I really love that batch. I don't know what you did differently. The next batch was fine. I still bought it, but that batch 28 was fantastic. I just love that. And I think for the kind of company we are, small as we are, that's kind of what I want. I want there to be some uniqueness to everything we bring out, because I think that's cool as a company.
Okay. You segued great for me. You just brought up the customer, and I wanted to talk about the pour. So tell us about how people come to you, discover you. Once they try it out, what keeps them coming back? I know you talk specifically, you have a nice flavor palette niche of high proof and very bold taste.
I think the proof is a big reason why people enjoy us. I think they tasted it at a high proof, and it tastes good. They get the bang for their buck with the proof, but then the flavor is really good. I think some of what we do, I think we surprise people because they look at the back of the bottle and they go, "Oh, yeah, this is MGP," and then they have expectations of what that means. And not that that's bad. I think MGP has got a great reputation finally, and it has for several years. But I think when they taste what we are doing, even in some of our more simple products or our earlier products, we've done a little bit of this blending that I'm discussing, that it surprises them, and they don't quite recognize it as MGP. So I think that the packaging is kind of that, I'll drink my whiskey the way I'll drink it however I want. It's kind of that spirit of freedom. I've deserved this drink. I've always felt like at least our flagship product, Backbone Uncut's, kind of got that Wild West feel to it. So, I think people kind of identify with that kind of freedom, and it's barrel proof, man. Don't give me something that's that you manipulated or watered down. I want the real deal. I'm just going on, but that's kind of my thoughts off the top of my head.
Okay, great, and that's what keeps your customers coming back. What are some challenges you're finding on the pour side of things?
Yeah.
Getting more customer involvement. What are some of the challenges you're seeing actively right now?
So it's really hard to build brands. We travel a lot, and we'll get to certain markets once or twice a year, and it's invariably the distributors had a rep change, or distributors have got a ton of focuses. So it's sort of one step forward, two steps back. Sometimes it's two steps forward, one step back. But there's so much competition out there, Matthew, that it's just really hard to, whenever you think you've kind of laid down some concrete, or it just seems like you go back and it's not quite the same, and it's not the foundation that you thought you had created is kind of a moving target a little bit. Part of what I said there, it's just there's so much whiskey out there and that trickles down to other parts. I mean, buying barrels is a big part of my business. It's a very cash intensive business. I'm not worried about the next 2 years. I'm trying to buy barrels for year 3 and 4 from now. So there's a lot of noise out there, and it's sometimes hard to, good stuff gets lost in the noise. So yeah, those are some of the challenges for sure.
All right. So going back through your journey and your co-founders and the team you've grown out of this, how does team communication, how does it contribute to the success of the overall process?
Tell me more about that question. I'm not sure I quite follow it.
So how is team communication, how does it play into the success of Backbone?
Well, there's only 3.5 of us. The 0.5 is a very short man. Just kidding. My partner, he's more involved in the other business. So this is not a lot of us, and I think we're all willing to help each other. There's a spirit of cooperation. We'll cover each other. It's much more what I would call bush telegraph communication. It's not formal meetings or stuff like that. It's much more of a quick call or a text. But I think there's definitely a pioneer spirit in Backbone, and I think that the people that I do work with are great that way. They really they'll do anything. I mean, they believe us. They believe in the brands. They believe in the company. So the communication is very informal, very much on the fly. Call, text, email, and then maybe, if it's a call, maybe last 2 minutes and then we're done.
Have you had any situations where one of those calls, texts, or emails were interpreted differently and things went the wrong direction?
Nothing major. Nothing where, anyone got mad at just maybe, we made a mistake or something but it wasn't that we, got mad at each other or anything like that. So, as the main operating partner, I need, the other two people that work in the company. Kevin is the Midwest rep, and then I've got Sam as our sales and marketing person. So I need them. So I need to treat them really well. Yeah.
That's good to know. Another thing for your upcoming entrepreneurs right there. So you talked a lot about innovation. I know you defined innovation as blending and reblending, but on the flip side of another side of innovation, what are some ways the 3.5 or 4 of you get together and generate new ideas for your business?
So that's a great question. We do have a monthly meeting, and we begin the meeting by going around the table and just everyone kind of talking about what they're seeing or hearing in the industry. And that's a great way for us to kind of think out loud on what the trends are, what we need to be thinking about maybe. And so we collaborate in that meeting. We talk out loud and we'll pursue things. I mean, I got to tell you one example of that. It was in a meeting probably in the middle of the year, and Sam, our sales and marketing guy, we have great engagement on Instagram, but we don't necessarily see the benefit in the store or at the consumer level. And and so how do we connect our Instagram followers with our brands more? Some are in states where we have distribution, some are not. Some are in states where we have distribution, but we don't have a ton of distribution, so it's hard to find our stuff. So out of that conversation, we started looking into an online retailer that we could work with. That if someone wants to buy our stuff, there's a clear pathway for them to do that. And as of this week, we just we're getting an order shipped out to a retailer. And not only that, we've taken it a step further. But through that process, we're going to do some special releases. We have a new product on deck. It's a new blend that I've had in mind for a while. We're only going to do, I think, 70 or 80 bottles. The product's going to be called Backbone Estate. And I'm going to release it through the online retailer, and it'll be for our Instagram audience or whoever follows us on. We have LinkedIn and we have Facebook and stuff like that. But so there's a really good example of that just came out of us, the 4 of us talking in a meeting out loud And there's other things like that where, no one in our company is like, we got to do it this way. Everyone's okay. Let's hear that out, and then we'll vet it, and then we'll see if it works. So, but that's how we do it.
No, that's a great example. That's really good. You guys come together and flesh that out. But taking from that, you kind of hinted at, again, you're doing really good with my segues for me. Thank you. I was like, I was going to ask that question. All right. Where do you want to take Backbone Bourbon next? Where do you see it going? Say
I think everyone would say, hey, I want to build it up and sell it for millions of dollars. But, I'm realistic. I want to make it a good small business. I think if I have to be honest, I'd say we're probably more of a single barrel business. And there are a number of companies that's what they do. They're not really building brands, but they really, their business is pretty much a single barrel business. That being said, I still do believe in the brand. So all I want to do, really, I want it to be a great workplace for the people that work at Backbone. I want them to look forward to coming to work. I want to make it a sound, small business that, has some credibility. Obviously, I want to be profitable. I want there to be a financial gain, but I'm basically, to give you an analogy, I want to hit a single, and if I get a home run, great. But all I'm looking to do is hit a single right now.
All right. So you are staying focused in your goal, in your vision. Okay. What kind of impact? So you're in Indianapolis, correct? Yes. So what kind of impact do you see yourself making on the community? You mentioned you want to make on the employees. What about the community around you? What kind of impact do you see you making there?
Yeah, I want Indianapolis to be a destination to taste whiskey. I want it to be the B side. If Kentucky's the A side, I want Indianapolis to be the B side. And that's really, I would just love it if I could be somewhat involved in Indiana becoming a tourist destination. I've had, we've done our tastings in Indianapolis for 2.5, 3 years. I've had people come from New York. I've had people come from Texas, all over the Midwest. And that makes me feel really good because I don't think they'd be coming to Indianapolis for another reason. We can do this year round. It's not a summer thing. It's not a winter thing. This can be really huge. So there's, my network in Indianapolis, we are having low-level discussions on how we can build this up. We have some connections with the city and the state, and formally we are kind of working on it. But I don't see us being I think it's going to take some time for us to get that reputation.
Okay. Well, on that note, it seems like you were taking steps in that direction with your barrel picking headquarters.
Yeah.
And you said
and through my distribution business, I was able to do some barrel picks, and I did them with small distilleries. I did them with big distilleries, and I kind of had a good sense of what I would want out of a barrel tasting. And we've never had a time in the last 2 or 3 years where we have so many whiskey groups and they want to find unique stuff. So number one, they want to pick a cool barrel. So that's number one. But the other thing too is they want a great experience. And I've tasted with a lot of groups and they all tell me about, the big companies, and it's somewhat of a sterile, dry. You can pick any barrel you want as long as it's one of these 5 that are in this bottle pre-pulled. You don't really get to go into the rick house. You don't get to drill into any barrels. You don't get that intimate, up-close experience of what it's like to be in the bourbon business. And that's all I'm trying to do is to give them that up-close and personal experience that they'll go, damn, that was fun. We picked a great barrel, and we'll take that back to wherever, and people love it. But man, that was fun. It's like playing a great golf course. It doesn't have to be the most expensive golf course, and it doesn't have to be a famous golf course. But you get to the end of the round, and you go, man, that was fun. I'm going to come back and play it. And so that's what I'm trying to do. And I think that, how bad can it be? We're having a few little sips of whiskey, and we're talking about whiskey. We're talking about what we're passionate about. It's a lot of fun. It really is.
All right. So yeah, that's talk about innovation right there. That is a great customer experience, and just providing that behind the scenes, that unique experience.
Yeah.
Definitely help tourist destination.
Once you get a group and come taste with me, Matthew.
It sounds like a wonderful idea. I'll have to get on out there.
It's not that far.
I've got a neighbor that would be all
Absolutely.
about it. All right. So last couple questions. This one I find to be the hardest. What is your favorite beverage you produce?
So it's hard, but I'll tell you one thing that I'm really proud of. We have a new product called the Big Bash, and it's a cool label. It's got an American flag on it or an American banner. But it was an ambitious blending project. There's a lot going on in this thing, and it took me longer than I thought, but I finally found a blend that I really liked. So it's an American whiskey. It's a blend of straight bourbon and straight rye. 90% of it, the whiskey was in some kind of finishing barrel. Mainly the blend is bourbon and Barbados rum and rye and port barrels. But it's got some other little interesting things in there. And one of the barrels I used was bourbon finished in banana rum. And when I sip Big Bash, I get this wonderful, and only I get it. I don't expect people don't really get this, but I get this kind of ripe banana component to it. It just makes me smile because there's a subtlety there. It just kind of gives me that little grin on my face that it was able to come through with everything else. So yeah, that's my favorite. But tomorrow it'll probably be something different.
That sounds like a very deep flavor profile. It's really cool. I love how the beverage industry in general is just coming around to, like, wine's had it for a long time, the wine tasting, the profiles, but everybody's sort of treating their beverage like that now. Bourbon, black coffee. It's really neat to see that merger of the really appreciation of these different craft beverages.
Amen.
Anyway,
that's all right.
So do you have any upcoming events or promotions you'd like to talk about? And also, where can we find you if we want to really get it?
Yeah, so the events I have, it's really an open book, but I really want people to contact us and to think about coming to taste with me in Indianapolis. And it's a perfect opportunity for people for the Midwest states, places like Missouri and Kansas, Illinois, Ohio. So this time of year, we have a ton of tastings, and we have them various places. Kevin and I do a bunch of them. So, but it just depends on where people are at. But the one thing I would ask people to think about is to go to our website, and there's a link to inquire about the single barrel experience. If you can't come taste with me, we can send you barrel samples. Of course, we need a way to get them. If they do buy a barrel, we need to go through distribution and a retailer or a restaurant. But if someone's listening and they're in a bourbon group and they haven't done a pick with me, I invite them to try. I think you'll be pleasantly surprised.
Okay. Well, for my Missouri listeners, we have a great bourbon group out here in St. Louis. They just had their Midwest Bourbon Festival they just hosted. So, well,
nice.
Yeah. Check it out. But anyway, Nolan,
thank you, Matthew,
for taking the time about Saccone Bourbon Company, and I really appreciate it. I hope our listeners definitely found some value in this, especially those who are interested in the business itself and the trial tribulations and what uniquely yours. Again, thank you very much.
Thank you, Matthew. Appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to Harvest to Pour, the business of beverages with Matthew Shep. Check the show notes for our guest contact information and connect with Matthew Shep on LinkedIn today.